Margaret Maggie Sullivan was 23 years old when she decided to build something her neighbors in Bayfield, Wisconsin considered absolutely unnecessary and mildly insane. It was August 1894, and Maggie, a widow for 2 years after her husband Thomas died in a logging accident, was planning to dig an underground storage shed specifically for firewood. Her neighbors thought she'd lost her mind. Everyone stored firewood the same way, stacked outside under a basic roof or tarp. Sometimes the wood got wet, sometimes it froze. That was just how firewood storage worked. Building an underground shed seemed like enormous effort for negligible benefit. But Maggie understood something her neighbors didn't. She'd spent 2 winters burning through twice as much wood as she should have needed because moisture-damaged wood burns inefficiently. Wet or frozen wood produces more smoke than heat, wastes fuel, requires constant attention, makes heating expensive and frustrating. She'd done the mathematics. A conventional house in Bayfield needed approximately 6 cords of wood per winter, but if half that wood was compromised by moisture, which was common with outdoor storage exposed to rain, snow, and temperature swings, you'd burn 8 cords to get the heating value of 6. At $3 per cord, that extra cost mattered. Underground storage would solve the problem. Below frost line, about 4 feet deep in Wisconsin, the earth maintained constant temperature around 45 to 50 degrees year-round. At that depth, moisture didn't freeze. Humidity was naturally low because cold air held less moisture. Wood stored underground would stay dry and properly seasoned, regardless of surface weather. Her plan was simple, but labor-intensive. Dig a rectangular pit 10 feet wide, 16 feet long, 6 feet deep. Line the walls with stacked stone to prevent collapse. Build a wooden roof frame and cover it with earth, creating an underground chamber accessed by a sloped ramp and door. The chamber would hold approximately 4 cords of wood, enough for most of a winter, kept perfectly dry by being underground. The practical advantage was enormous. Dry wood burns at maximum efficiency, produces minimal smoke, generates heat rather than just making smoke and using fuel. Properly dried wood has maybe 8,000 BTU per pound. Wet wood might produce 4,000 BTU per pound. You need twice as much to get the same heat. Beyond efficiency, there was the convenience factor. In conventional outdoor storage, you'd wade through snow to access your woodpile. Wood would be frozen, sometimes buried in drifts. In an underground shed, you'd descend the ramp into a 50-degree chamber where wood was accessible and never frozen. She started excavation in early September after harvest was done, marked out the dimensions with stakes and string, 10 feet by 16 feet. That would provide 160 square feet of storage floor area, adequate for 4 cords stacked efficiently with room for access and air circulation. The excavation was brutal manual labor that tested her physical limits and psychological endurance. Wisconsin's soil in Bayfield was glacial till, clay mixed with rocks of all sizes left by retreating ice sheets thousands of years ago. The soil was heavy, sticky when wet from September rains, hard as concrete when dry during sunny periods. Unpredictable, exhausting, she'd dig methodically, starting each morning at dawn. Fill the spade, maybe 15 pounds of earth. Climb out of the growing pit using a makeshift ladder. Dump the earth on what would become the perimeter berms, the elevated ground surrounding the excavation. Climb back down. Repeat, hour after hour, day after day. The physical toll accumulated rapidly. Her hands blistered within 3 days. Painful, fluid-filled bubbles where spade handle rubbed skin. The blisters broke and bled by day 5. By week 2, thick calluses were forming over the damaged tissue. The calluses hurt less than blisters but made her grip clumsy. Her back was the worst problem. The repeated motion, bending forward, loading spade, straightening while lifting weight, climbing, dumping, descending, bending again, created strain that never fully subsided. She'd wake each morning stiff and sore, needing 30 minutes of careful movement before her back would function normally. By evening, the pain would return, sharp and persistent. Her shoulders burned constantly from lifting. Each loaded spade weighed 15 to 20 pounds. She'd lift perhaps 300 loads per day. That was 4,500 to 6,000 pounds of earth moved daily through repeated shoulder and arm motions. The muscles adapted slowly, becoming harder and more defined, but the adaptation hurt continuously. Progress was measured in painful increments. She could excavate approximately 1 cubic yard per day, working from dawn to dusk, with brief breaks when her body demanded rest. 1 cubic yard equals 27 cubic feet. The total excavation was 10 feet wide by 16 feet long by 6 feet deep, 960 cubic feet, which equals 35.5 cubic yards. At 1 cubic yard per day, that meant 36 days of excavation if she could maintain pace. But she couldn't maintain pace continuously. Some days brought rain that turned the pit into a muddy mess, requiring hours of bailing before resuming digging. Some days her body simply refused, too exhausted, too sore, needing rest. Some days she encountered particularly stubborn rock layers that slowed progress to half-normal rate. Realistically, the excavation consumed 52 days from early September through late October, 52 days of sustained manual labor that would have broken most people. But Maggie had motivation most people didn't. She was a widow surviving on minimal income, and reducing heating costs by even a few dollars per winter was worth months of brutal labor. Now came the stonework. The earthen walls needed reinforcement to prevent collapse. She gathered fieldstones from her property and from the woods nearby. Limestone and granite pieces ranging from fist-sized to 20-pound chunks. Hundreds of stones needed to line 160 square feet of wall perimeter at 6 feet height. She dry-stacked the stones against the earthen walls. No mortar, just careful placement selecting stones that fit together. The stones served multiple purposes, prevented soil from crumbling into the chamber, provided air circulation through gaps between stones, created thermal mass that would help stabilize temperature. The stonework took 3 weeks. She'd select stones, position them, test stability, adjust placement. Layer by layer, the walls rose. By mid-November, she had stone-lined walls extending from floor to within 2 feet of ground level. For the roof, she needed a structure strong enough to support earth covering but accessible for loading and unloading wood. She built a timber frame using split logs, created horizontal beams spanning the 10-foot width, spaced 3 feet apart. Over these beams, she laid smaller poles perpendicular, creating a grid. The entrance was critical. She excavated a sloped ramp descending from ground level to the chamber floor, an 8-foot ramp at comfortable walking angle. At the bottom, she framed a door opening. The door itself was built from rough boards, hinged with leather straps and iron pins, salvaged from her husband's old tool shed. By late November, the structure was complete. She covered the timber roof with layers of bark and sod, creating an earth-covered roof 2 feet thick. The earth provided insulation and protection. From above ground, the shed was barely visible, just a slight mound with a ramp descending into it. The interior was a stone-lined chamber 10 feet by 16 feet, 6 feet high at the center, dark, no windows, only light from the entrance when the door was open, cool, the constant 50-degree temperature of earth at that depth, dry. The relative humidity was naturally low because cool air holds less moisture than warm air. She moved her firewood into the underground chamber in December before the heavy snows arrived, carried it down the ramp armload by armload, stacked it carefully, leaving air gaps for circulation, organizing by wood type, keeping the best seasoned wood accessible near the entrance. 4 cords total, approximately 512 cubic feet of wood. The chamber's 960 cubic feet, 10x16x6, accommodated it easily with room for movement and access. The town's reaction was immediate and predictable. Maggie Sullivan had dug a hole in the ground to store firewood. Everyone knew outdoor stacking worked fine. She'd wasted months of labor building something completely unnecessary. The woman was either very foolish or mildly insane. Robert Henderson, who owned the farm adjacent to Maggie's small property, made his opinion clear in November when he saw the completed shed. "Mrs. Sullivan, you've dug a root cellar for firewood. That's the strangest thing I've seen in 20 years farming. Wood stores fine outdoors. Everyone knows that. You've wasted 3 months of labor for nothing. Outdoor wood gets wet. Wet wood burns inefficiently. This chamber maintains constant temperature and low humidity. The wood stays dry regardless of weather. It's underground. Underground is damp. Your wood will rot down there. Underground below frost line is actually drier than outdoor, exposed to rain and snow. The earth temperature is constant at 50 degrees. At that temperature, humidity is naturally low. Wood won't rot. It'll stay perfectly seasoned." Henderson shook his head and walked away, certain she'd learn her mistake when winter came and her underground wood was moldy and useless. By December, multiple neighbors had visited to see the dugout woodshed. Most reactions ranged from bemused skepticism to outright mockery. The general consensus was that Maggie had good intentions but poor judgment. Outdoor wood storage had worked for generations. Her elaborate underground system was unnecessary engineering that would probably fail. Through December and January, Maggie's firewood performed exactly as she'd predicted, and the efficiency gains were remarkable enough that even skeptical neighbors couldn't deny the mathematics. Every evening around 5 p.m., she'd descend the ramp into the underground chamber. The transition was striking. Stepping from 20-degree or colder outside air into the constant 50-degree chamber felt like entering a warm space, even though 50 degrees was actually cool. The relative warmth was noticeable. Inside the chamber, she'd light a small hand lantern. The dim light would illuminate the stacked wood, organized by type, with the best seasoned hardwood near the entrance for easy access. She'd select her evening supply, perhaps 8 to 10 pieces for overnight burning. The wood was always dry to the touch, no frost, no ice crystals, no moisture, just perfectly seasoned wood at 50 degrees. The wood would light easily when she built her evening fire. Dry wood ignites readily because there's no moisture to evaporate first. Within minutes, she'd have a proper fire going. The wood would burn hot and clean, minimal smoke, maximum heat output. The efficiency difference was measurable. Properly dried hardwood, oak or maple at 15 to 20% moisture content, produces approximately 8,000 BTU per pound. That's the theoretical maximum for wood fuel. Wet or frozen wood at 30 to 40% moisture might produce 4,000 to 5,000 BTU per pound. You'd need nearly twice as much wet wood to get the same heating value as dry wood. Maggie's consumption reflected this efficiency. She burned approximately 3/4 of a cord per month through December and January. A cord is 128 cubic feet, or roughly 2 tons of hardwood. 3/4 cord monthly meant she'd use maybe 4.5 cords for the entire winter if consumption stayed constant. Her neighbors, storing wood outdoors, were experiencing significantly worse performance. Their wood was absorbing moisture from multiple sources: rain that found its way under tarps and partial shelters, snow that melted and soaked into exposed wood, humidity that penetrated during warm days and froze during cold nights. When outdoor stored wood is brought inside to burn, you're essentially burning wet wood. The fire's heat energy first goes into evaporating the water content, turning liquid water into steam. Only after the moisture is driven off does the wood start releasing its BTU potential through combustion. You're burning fuel just to dry the wood before it can actually heat your house. Robert Henderson's wood consumption illustrated the problem perfectly. By mid-January, he'd burned through 4 cords, consumption rate of roughly 1 cord monthly. That was 33% more wood than Maggie for the same heating period. His house was similar size to hers. Similar insulation, similar heating needs. The difference was entirely wood quality, his wet and frozen, hers perfectly dry. The Morrison family was doing even worse. Their partially exposed woodpile had absorbed significant moisture during December's thaw-freeze cycles. They were burning through wood at perhaps 1¼ cords monthly, 67% more than Maggie. The inefficiency was costing them real money. At $3 per cord, they were spending $5 monthly on wood, when Maggie spent $2.25 for equivalent heating. Then, February brought the sustained cold snap that proved everything and transformed how Bayfield understood the relationship between wood storage and heating efficiency. The cold arrived February 6th, with warning signs that long-time Wisconsin residents recognized as potentially dangerous. Morning started at 10 degrees, cold but normal for February. By noon, 0 degrees. By evening, -10 degrees. The temperature kept dropping through the night. -15 by midnight, -20 by dawn, February 7th. This wasn't temporary cold front passing through. This was Arctic air mass settling over northern Wisconsin and persisting. Temperature stayed at or below -20 for 12 consecutive days. Sustained extreme cold that exposed every weakness in heating systems, wood storage methods, and winter preparation throughout the region. The wind made everything worse. Sustained 15 to 20 miles per hour with gusts to 30. Wind chill pushed effective temperature to -40 or colder. Exposed skin froze in minutes. Breathing outdoor air caused immediate lung pain. Normal outdoor activities became dangerous or impossible. Maggie's underground woodshed maintained its constant 50-degree temperature through the entire cold snap without any variation. The earth surrounding the chamber, tons of soil providing massive thermal insulation, meant that surface temperature had essentially no effect on underground conditions. Whether it was -20 above or +20 didn't matter at 6 feet depth. The temperature stayed 50 degrees. She'd descend the ramp each evening as usual. The 50-degree chamber felt genuinely warm after being outside in -20. She'd remove her heavy coat in the shed, could work comfortably in just a sweater at 50 degrees after exposure to killing cold outside. Select her wood, still perfectly dry, never frozen, ideal burning condition despite 2 weeks of sustained Arctic cold above ground. The wood's performance was unchanged from December conditions, lit easily, burned hot and clean. No smoking or sputtering, just efficient combustion producing maximum BTU output per pound of fuel. She maintained comfortable house temperature, maybe 65 degrees, burning her normal 3/4 cord monthly equivalent. Her neighbors were in escalating crisis as the cold snap persisted. Their outdoor stored wood was experiencing catastrophic failure. The sustained -20 temperatures meant everything froze solid. Moisture that had accumulated in the wood during milder weather was now ice, frozen crystals permeating the wood fiber. Frozen wood is terrible fuel. The ice must be melted before combustion can begin. That requires significant heat energy. You're essentially burning fuel to melt ice before you can burn fuel to heat your house. The inefficiency is dramatic. Robert Henderson's situation became desperate by day 5, February 10th. His remaining wood supply was completely frozen. Every log was covered in visible frost and ice, where moisture had penetrated during previous weeks. He tried to burn the frozen wood, creating fires that sputtered and smoked and produced minimal heat despite consuming large quantities of fuel. His house temperature was dropping despite burning wood continuously. He'd maintain a fire around the clock, feeding frozen logs into the stove constantly. The stove would be hot, glowing red in places from sustained burning, but the house couldn't stay above 50 degrees. Heat was being wasted melting ice and evaporating moisture instead of warming air. By day 7, February 12th, Henderson had burned through 6.5 cords total for the winter. Should have lasted until April at normal rates. He was consuming wood at twice his planned rate and still couldn't maintain adequate house temperature. The mathematics were impossible. He'd run out of wood by early March, with 6 weeks of winter remaining. The Morrison family ran out of wood completely by day 9, February 14th. They'd depleted their entire winter supply of 7 cords, had nothing left except furniture and possessions to burn. Their children were showing cold exposure symptoms despite being indoors. Lethargic, confused, skin turning grayish. The house was 43 degrees inside, despite burning their kitchen table and 3 chairs for fuel. On day 6, he walked to Maggie's property, something he'd avoided since mocking her shed in November. Found her outside, splitting kindling, her house warm despite the extreme cold. "How is your house warm?" he asked without preamble. "Mine can't stay above 50 degrees, despite burning wood constantly. Your house is clearly warm. How?" "My wood is dry, yours is frozen and moisture damaged. Dry wood burns efficiently, wet wood wastes fuel. But all our wood is frozen. It's minus 20 degrees. Everything freezes. Not underground. Come see." She led him to the dugout shed entrance. They descended the ramp into the chamber. Henderson stopped completely, shocked by what he felt. Warm air, not hot, 50 degrees. But after minus 20 outside, 50 felt warm, and the wood stacked in the chamber was completely dry. Not frozen, not damp, just perfectly seasoned firewood at 50 degrees. "How is this not frozen?" he asked, touching a log that was unmistakably dry and at normal handling temperature. "We're 6 feet underground. The earth temperature at this depth doesn't change with surface weather. It's 50 degrees year-round. The wood stays at 50 degrees, regardless of what happens above ground, and at 50 degrees, relative humidity is naturally low. The wood can't absorb moisture because there's minimal moisture available." "But it's underground. I thought underground was damp." "Deep underground near water table, yes, but 6 feet down in well-drained soil. This is actually drier than outdoor storage exposed to rain and snow. The constant temperature and natural drainage make this ideal wood storage." Henderson stood in the chamber, understanding that he'd been completely wrong. The shed he'd mocked was superior storage that solved every problem outdoor stacking created. The 3 months of labor Maggie had invested had paid for itself many times over in wood efficiency and convenience. By day 8 of the cold snap, 15 families had visited Maggie's dugout woodshed, and what they found challenged every assumption they'd held about firewood storage and winter heating. Word had spread through Bayfield rapidly. The widow Sullivan somehow had dry wood and was heating comfortably, while families with full outdoor woodpiles were burning through frozen supplies and still couldn't stay warm. People were skeptical initially. How could underground storage outperform conventional methods everyone had used for generations? But desperation drove them to investigate. The first visitors came in pairs or small groups, walking the quarter-mile from town to Maggie's property in minus 20 cold. They'd arrive frost-covered and skeptical. She'd invite them to descend into the dugout shed with her. The transformation was visible on their faces. Stepping from minus 20 into 50 degrees created immediate physical response. The relative warmth was shocking. Then seeing the wood, hundreds of logs stacked neatly, all completely dry and unfrozen, despite 2 weeks of Arctic conditions above ground, contradicted everything they believed possible. "How is this dry?" they'd ask, touching logs that were unmistakably room temperature and moisture-free. "It's minus 20 outside. Everything should be frozen." Maggie would explain patiently, repeatedly, to group after group. The earth temperature at 6 feet depth stayed constant year-round, maybe 45 to 50 degrees in Wisconsin. The massive thermal mass of surrounding soil prevented temperature fluctuations. The cold at the surface couldn't penetrate to that depth fast enough to affect conditions. But underground is damp, they'd insist. Root cellars are damp. Basements are damp. How is this dry? Shallow underground near groundwater can be damp, but 6 feet down in well-drained soil, the temperature is cool, and cool air holds less moisture than warm air. The relative humidity here is naturally low, maybe 35 to 40%. That's ideal for wood storage. Outdoor storage in winter can be 70 to 90% humidity from snow and temperature swings. The physics were undeniable once explained. Cold air at 50 degrees had low absolute humidity. The wood couldn't absorb moisture because there was minimal moisture available in the air. The constant temperature meant no condensation cycles. The stone-lined walls allowed air circulation while preventing soil moisture from entering. The earth roof kept precipitation out. Everything about the design promoted dry conditions. By day 10, February 15th, the community understanding had shifted completely. The dugout woodshed wasn't foolish over-engineering. It was brilliant, practical design, solving a problem most people didn't realize existed because they'd accepted inefficient wood storage as normal. Robert Henderson came again on February 16th, this time not to learn but to apologize and ask for help. "Mrs. Sullivan, I was wrong about your shed. Completely wrong. It works better than anything I've seen. I'm burning through wood trying to stay alive. You're comfortable with normal consumption. Would you help me build one? I'll pay you for consulting and design advice." Maggie agreed. Not just for Henderson, but for anyone who wanted to learn. By the time the cold snap ended February 18th, she'd consulted with 11 families who wanted to build underground wood storage before next winter. The construction teaching became a community project that spring and summer of 1895. Maggie would visit each site, assess drainage and soil conditions, advise on dimensions and depth. She'd explain the critical factors. Must be below frost line, must have good drainage, must have adequate stone lining for wall stability, must have proper ventilation through gaps in stonework, must have earth-covered roof for insulation. Some families dug their own sheds, following her guidance. Others hired labor, but used her design specifications. By September 1895, 8 underground woodsheds had been completed in Bayfield area. All were variations on Maggie's basic design. Rectangular pits 6 to 8 feet deep, stone-lined walls, earth-covered roofs, sloped entrance ramps. That winter, 1895 to 1896, provided perfect comparison data. Families using underground storage consumed 25 to 35% less wood than previous winters. The Henderson family, who'd burned 7 cords the previous winter, used 5 cords with their new underground storage. The Morrisons dropped from 7 cords to 4.5. The savings were consistent and dramatic across all families. The economic impact was significant. At $3 per cord, saving 2 cords meant $6 per winter. For families earning maybe $200 annually total, $6 was 3% of yearly income. Over 10 winters, the savings would be $60, substantial money that could be redirected to other needs. She'd explain the principles patiently. Depth matters, need to be below frost line. Drainage matters, site selection prevents water accumulation. Stone walls prevent collapse while allowing air circulation. Earth roof provides insulation and protection. The entrance ramp needs to slope gradually for safe access. By the following summer, 1895, 8 dugout woodsheds had been built in Bayfield using Maggie's design. All performed exactly as she described. Wood stored underground stayed dry, accessible and efficient, regardless of surface weather. The efficiency gains were documented through that winter. Families using underground storage consumed 25 to 30% less wood than conventional outdoor storage. The savings paid for construction labor within 2 winters. After that, it was pure cost reduction forever. Maggie lived in her small house for another 30 years. The dugout woodshed functioned perfectly for all of them, never required major repairs. The stone walls remained stable, the earth roof prevented leaks, the constant underground temperature kept wood perfectly dry through every winter. She remarried in 1900 at age 29 to a carpenter who appreciated her engineering knowledge and understood the value of efficient design. They had 3 children. She became known throughout the region as the woman who'd revolutionized firewood storage by understanding that underground was actually drier than outdoor. She died in 1938 at age 67. Her obituary mentioned her 3 children and her service to the community, but focused primarily on the dugout woodshed. The underground storage system that proved constant temperature and natural drainage matter more than conventional assumptions about where things should be stored. The original shed still exists, maintained by the Wisconsin Historical Society. Modern moisture analysis confirms the conditions. Relative humidity in the chamber stays between 35% and 45% year-round, ideal for wood storage. Surface humidity during Wisconsin winters ranges from 60% to 90%, terrible for outdoor wood storage. The story is about a widow who understood that efficiency matters more than tradition, who spent 3 months building something that would save money and fuel for 30 years, who proved that thinking about physics and moisture dynamics produces better solutions than doing what everyone has always done. Because sometimes the person digging a hole knows more about wood storage than people stacking wood outdoors. The underground shed everyone mocked was actually superior engineering, and understanding that underground doesn't mean damp, it means constant temperature and natural drainage, makes all the difference.